Today we're going to be talking about plant reproduction. In other words, how do plants reproduce? If they did not reproduce, then we wouldn't have more plants and more plants and more plants, right? So, how do plants reproduce? So let's examine this question and look through this. So reproduction of non-vascular plants. What is something that you... I'll go back to this before so that you can answer me. What do you know about vascular plants has what? They have vascular bundles to get their nutrients. Non-vascular plants do not. Now, we're going to know about non-vascular plants. What's something you know other than this about non-vascular plants? Hold on. What do you know about non-vascular? Learn more about them. Reproduction in non-vascular plants, water is absolutely necessary. Okay? Got to write this down. Water is absolutely necessary.
What page are we on in here?
182 for about the 5th time. All right. So zygotes grow into stalks and capsules. Necessary. Well, water is necessary. You don't have to write this down, but I just want to let you know that it's in your textbook because the sperm must swim to the unmoving eggs. That's why water is necessary. So after the fertilization takes place, the zygote, which is talking about right here, remains attached to the gametophytes and grows into stalks and capsules. Okay? Now, and then, of course, thousands of spores are produced in each capsule, and the conditions have to be right. And when they are right and the spores are released into the nearby soil, then they begin to grow. Now, not the whole entire amount of spores that is deposited in the soil will grow. That's not the case. It will only be a small amount. So thousands of spores are produced in each capsule. Okay? Now, you see the capsule here. Okay? Here's the spores. Look at this, how they're being spread there. Okay? So the male and female, the water moves the eggs or the sperm to the eggs so that they can be fertilized. You have a sporophyte, gametophyte. All right, everybody got this? Okay. If you don't, you need to see someone else. What you see, the sporophyte and the gametophyte structures. It's the... All right. Alternations of generations. That's also on this page. And what it is when the repeating cycles, a gametophyte and the sporophyte structure process, basically, or cycle that takes place. And that's called alternation of generations. Okay? Now, let's reproduction in seedless vascular plants. Oh, here we go. So, reproduction in seedless vascular plants. So, just like other plants, ferns have alternation of generation. Okay? So, on the underside of the mature frond are what they call sori. And that is the structure that produces spores, okay? Just so you know, that produces the spores. And that's on the underneath part of that structure, okay? So then tiny spores are scattered by the wind, okay? So you see here that a spore pod right here. And then the spore it's opening up and then the spores are coming out. All right, so tiny fern spores are scattered out by the wind. We know that. Those that fall on suitable soil, not every spore is going to germinate, is going to grow further. but many will. So those that fall on on the ground, they will grow into a heart-shaped plant. Okay, you see that? That looks like a heart-shaped leaf, right? Yes. All right, so, and actually this Gametophyte usually it's hard to see because it usually grows no larger than a fingernail, the size of a fingernail. It does produce eggs and sperms, and it requires water. It does require water. On here, let's talk about, so now let's talk about angiosperms. And just like I said, gymnosperms does not produce flowers because Jim doesn't like flowers. Angiosperms do because Angie likes flowers. Anyway, so angiosperms ovaries, they swell up to form a fruit that is surrounded by and surrounds and protects the seed inside of that embryo or ovary. Now, angiosperms have flowers, just like we talked about. Angiosperms encase their zygotes inside of seeds. And we'll have 4 main parts, which we're going to talk about next. They have 4 main parts. So think about when pollen grows on land, on another stigma, the pollen produces a pollen tube that sort of grows down through the style of the ovary to the ovary. All right, so I'll let you get that finished and then we will go over the diagram. All right, so now let's talk about this flower, okay? And you can look with me at the same time on page 185, okay? So the first thing we want to talk about is a stamen, okay? The stamen is the male part, okay? And that it's referring to, the stamen is referring to these little things here, okay? Now, this is the pollen-producing anthers, okay? That grow at the very top of the stalk, and they're called filaments, okay? They're called filaments.
Oh, wait, I remember seeing stamens and carpel and petals and sepals on our tower yesterday.
All right. Then we have our carpel, which is the female part. All right, and you can also see that with me on page 185 as I talk through this. This is the female part of the flower. Pollen is carried by the wind or animals from the stamen over to the sticky stigma at the top of the carpel. Now, that is where the pollen sticks, and at the base of the style is the ovary, and that contains 1 or more ovules. Of course, they're unfertilized until that time. And then number 3, you have the petals. Of course, the petals are really often, they're colorful, more often than not. And they are created really to attract like bees to pollinate and things like that. So your petals are like these pretty things right here. Of course, these aren't very pretty. They're white, but unless you like white flowers, and in some cases I do. Okay, so you got your petals. Then you have your sepals, which is number 4, which is this right here. This is the green little part there. And what does it do? These are often like leaf-like structures that comes up around your petals, and they protect the outside. It's like an extra protection of the outside of the petals. They protect the flower while it's in developing mode. Okay? When a pollen grain lands on another flower stigma, the pollen produces a pollen tube and the process begins. Some fruits are spread by wind, while others are spread by, the pollen is spread by animals. And there's a few plants that can reproduce on its own asexually, okay? So some fruits are spread by the wind, while other fruits contain a lot of sugar And those type of fruits those are the ones that attract birds and bees and things like that. And they disperse their seeds by eating the fruit. Okay? Isn't it amazing how God used animals to take care of his work too? Yes. On page 186, there are hens and chicks there. Okay? That is, let me just say, most plants reproduce sexually, but there are a few that reproduce asexually, and hens and chicks are examples of one type of plant that does reproduce asexually.
What page are we on?
We're on page 186.